soldier. Yeah.
I'm so unversed in the
Okay.
Also, there's like a million.
Yeah.
So why that one?
You know, it's just a friend of mine recently brought over this horse soldier, and I want to say it's a couple of former veterans that are, distributing horse soldier. And it's pretty good. I mean, I'm a pretty lowbrow guy in terms of I'm happy to, just drink a boxed wine or a beer, Keystone or little whiskey. But it's I've definitely learned over the years that for interviews or for presenting, it's not, I didn't make it up, but it turns out like a little bit of booze oftentimes makes for a better presentation or interview.
Okay. Yeah. It's hard for me because I'm like, well, I rarely drink, but when I do, I really feel it. And I'm like, oh, I'm driving home tonight.
Yeah.
The Vancast thing.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. I think you're responsibly as the Vancaster. Yeah. Otherwise you have to sleep at your Vancast location.
Yeah. Which is fun sometimes too. But no, but don't forget, that's yours to keep.
Oh, well, thank you. Thanks a bunch.
Yours.
That's awesome. I'm just so I can lean back.
Yeah. Make yourself.
So you live in Santa Clara then, or San Francisco?
Cupertino.
Oh, okay.
Right there.
Okay.
But I'm from a very small town. I will say Santa Cruz Mountains. But have you heard of Ben Lomond before?
I have heard of Ben Lomond. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I can't say I've been or knew that I was there, but a good friend of mine grew up in Santa Cruz, and I went to San Jose State, so I would sometimes go over the hill.
You beat me to it. Go Spartans. Me too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. Oh, wow. Now, did you go to the journalism school or the mass communications program?
It was RTVF, so the radio, television, film program.
Remind me, what year were you at San Jose State?
I graduated in 2015.
2015. Okay. Okay. You're a youngin'. It was a wonderful experience for me. I worked at a newspaper when I was in high school at the Antelope Valley Press. Yeah, and it was a great, it was I think 6-day-a-week newspaper. And I was kind of not an intern. I was sort of like, they called it a teen correspondent. But I just loved photojournalism. And so, I started out shooting like real estate photos, and eventually they were giving me kind of real assignments on weekends. And by the time I was a senior in high school, it was crystal clear to me that like I wanted to go to school for photojournalism. Actually, I just wanted to go and work as a photojournalist. I didn't want to go to school. But one of the great photojournalism programs on the West Coast at that time was San Jose State. I mean, because of a single individual, Jim McNay, who was heading up the photojournalism program. And it like blew my mind going to San Jose State. I showed up as a freshman and met Jim McNay and like a whole cast of characters in the program. And it was like a golden age of San Jose photojournalism. There was just huge support from alumni. There were a bunch of talented students that were a couple of years older than me that I kind of immediately realized, wow, okay, this is the level that you can perform at. Like Marcio Sanchez, who I think he's now Associated Press in San Francisco. John Lee was one of the guys, a little older than me. He went on to do great things. And so there was just all of this inspiration. Kim Kamenich had won the Pulitzer Prize. He was an alumni. Brad Mangian was working for Sports Illustrated, and Joe Gosen, and just all of these decorated alums, as well as folks that were coming in and kind of teaching or doing like evening presentations. And it definitely kind of just catapulted me forward that freshman year. I went from like kind of rinky-dink small-town newspaper with a narrow view of what photojournalism meant, what photography, what a camera could do for you, to kind of a much larger worldview after my freshman year of this is what's possible. And then in my sophomore year, I'd got a newspaper internship over my freshman summer at the Modesto Bee in Modesto, and it was a McClatchy newspaper with a great staff. I saved up $3,000 from my internship and took a semester off from San Jose State and drove around the Western United States. I wish I had a van, but I had a Honda Civic, and I took out all the seats except the driver's seat and cut out a sheet of plywood so I could sleep in the car, and drove around photographing rock climbing. But I really point at San Jose State. Like that was kind of the eye-opening moment that I knew I loved photography. I knew I loved rock climbing. But then after that freshman year at San Jose State, I just, I kind of, it just opened the curtain to, okay, this is what the world looks like. This is what photojournalism, this is what the possibilities are. And so, yeah, anyhow, that was a long-winded way of saying San Jose State holds a pretty special place in my heart.
I loved going to school there too. I think the film program for me, I don't know, I had a couple classes where the professor would ask me to kind of explain an editing technique to the class, and I'm like, no, I want to learn. Like, I know some things already, but so I don't know if it was. I learned a lot more, I feel like, in my experiences post college. But it's amazing that you had kind of already known what you were interested in going into college, because I think a lot of times people don't know and they go undeclared or something. But it's cool that you had like this inkling of what you wanted to do, and then once you were there, it just further solidified it. That was like me with film. So that's amazing.
And it was, and now I look back, the other unique kind of characteristic or moment in time at San Jose State when I was there, which I guess was the late 90s. So call it, 98 to in 98 to 2000, somewhere in that, or maybe 96 to 2000. I'm terrible with time. But it was also just that, the tech world was beginning to boom. Silicon Valley just took on a different meaning at that point in time. It went from, apple orchards to, the tech capital of the world. And I remember now, I look back in the rearview mirror of like, I kind of understood that was happening back then. And now I can look back and realize, oh yeah, right. The places that we used to buy burritos are now like, campuses for, tech companies. And it's, it's the Silicon, San Jose, Cupertino, it's the center of the universe for technology.
It's really wild. Yeah, I mean, I pass the Apple spaceship on the way to work every day.
Yeah.
I don't know how long I'll be there, because, I mean, it's to buy a place there, you got to be like pretty well off.
Yeah.
So I don't know how long I'll be there, but it's cool to rent a little shoebox studio there for now.
I mean, I never thought about this connection, and I could be getting some of the facts like a little off. But part of our journalism program at San Jose State was we brought in a lot of speakers, like incredible folks from, all over the country, but certainly the Bay Area. They would come in on like Wednesday nights or whatever it was for the National Press Photographers Association night. And it would be incredible. You'd have these talks from Pulitzer Prize winning photographers, and 100 or 200 folks would gather. And then afterwards, I learned you go out to drinks with everyone, and you'd sit there and, elbow up to the bar, and you'd get to sit next to this incredible woman who just shot, the Pulitzer Prize winning story for the Washington Post. And then occasionally, if students did something interesting, they would ask one of us to give a talk. And I came back from that 6 months on the road photographing rock climbing, and Jim McNay asked me if I would do one of these talks, and a Wednesday night talk. And so I really prepared. Like, I put a ton of energy into preparing to do this, 45-minute talk or hour-long talk, slideshow. And this is back in the day, with carousel projectors, and you'd put your carousel of 140 slides or 80 slides on top of the carousel, and you'd stand up there with the microphone and a clicker, and you'd tell your story while you're advancing the slides, way before Keynote. And but unknown to me, sitting in the audience, because it was the Silicon Valley, was a guy named Jim Heiser. And Jim was sitting in the audience, and I remember, now I've done a lot of presenting. I really love presenting. If I weren't a photographer or filmmaker, I'd be a teacher. And I nailed it that night. Like, I put so much energy into prepping for it, and it was funny, and people were laughing, and I remember at the end of the talk, guy comes up to me. I don't know him. I've never seen him before, and he says, "Hey, I'm Jim Heiser. I work in the tech world. I'd love to keep in touch. Maybe we could work together one day." And, and I was speaking to lots of folks and friends, and I was probably more interested in talking to my buddies after the show than, folks I didn't know, and getting to the bar, because we were all going to elbow up to the bar. And months later, I get a phone call from Jim Heiser, and it turns out Jim was working at Apple. And he pitched me on doing this professional profile, and that kind of cracked the door open to working in the technology world, which was, as a storyteller, was kind of this breakthrough moment. And, now 25 years later, it's a huge part of my life that opened up because of that one talk at San Jose State where Jim, who was a skier and outdoor person, but also high-level thinker in the tech world, approached me and just said, I'd love to work with you one day. And I think my point with that whole thing is just it was a special moment in time in the Bay Area, in the South Bay.
Sure.
Bay Area as a whole, but, San Jose, Cupertino, pretty unique moment in time.
I was just actually on the campus of San Jose State, I think Thursday night for the first time since graduating.
Oh, wow.
Because one of my cross-country teammates who lives in Ireland was visiting. And so we walked over. And even in the last 8 years, it's changed so much. Our little gym and event center is gone. It's like this whole indoor pool, rock climbing gym now. It's like, I'm like, that's where our tuition went. We didn't get to enjoy any of it. So,
ooh, I'd love to go and check out the campus. It was a good looking campus even when I was there. I mean, it felt collegiate and, it was inspiring and some good looking buildings. And
yeah. But similar to your experience with getting to hear from people who tell stories and getting to, shoulder up to the bar with them afterwards. This is why I'm so excited to be doing the Vancast, because I get to talk with people like you who inspire me in many ways. And I thank you for coming on the Vancast today, Corey Rich.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. This is the novelty of what you're doing is cool. I always, throughout my career, I remember the first time I heard it, Kent Koberstein, who is the director of photography at National Geographic. I remember Kent telling me one day, he said, I get a lot of phone calls that sound really similar and a lot of letters that are really someone pitching me an idea. And he told me about a photographer that once called him on a satellite phone in like the mid-90s from the Karakoram Mountains in Pakistan or Islamabad, I think, to pitch him on a story, from like a base camp. And Kent basically said, wait, so you're breaking up, but you're on a satellite phone? And he said, yeah, I'm on a satellite phone. And he said, that got my attention. It was different, right? It's like, how are you different? And anyhow, the point in that is this podcast is cool because it's different.
Thank you.
It's like, I love the idea that you rolled the studio right up to my house in Tahoe. It's pretty cool.
Well, I won't blow up your spot here, but like, it's crazy small world how my grandmother had a spot a few blocks away. So I grew up hanging out, walking down the same street. So it's so cool. I love this area so much.
That's wild. Yeah, that's wild. Is your grandma still with you guys?
She is, but she sold the condo. And now I've been here. The last time I was here was like 2 years ago.
Okay.
And then she sold it. So I got my last hurrah. But when you said where it was, I'm like, oh that's
really funny. Yeah. I have two neighbors that a neighbor on one side is 85 years old and our other neighbor's 94. And they're still out there shoveling snow. And I mean, it's kind of incredible, and on a year like this, it makes me actually wonder, like, is this going to break them? I mean, this year was so big. I mean, I think we've had like 48 feet of snow in South Lake Tahoe. I mean, it's remarkable how much snow we've had.
Yeah.
And so, but it's a special place. I moved to Tahoe, in early 2000. And it feels like it's only been a few years, but somehow 23 years have blown by. And it's the best decision I ever made.
It's a wonderful place. I mean, last night driving here, I rolled down the windows and I'm like, that's that smell getting out of the city. It's just pine trees and you can smell when it snows. I love that. First Vancast in the snow. First one in Tahoe, actually, too. So I'm stoked to be doing this with you today.
That's cool. I love it.
And actually, it was a few years ago, I think right before the pandemic, when I heard your interview on the Enormocast with Chris Kalous, and you were talking about your book coming out, and I got your book back then, and when I saw the cover, I was like, oh my gosh, like that's him, like that's the guy who took that photo. It's like one of my favorite images of all time on the Dawn wall here. And when I started looking at more of your work and got the book, I was like, there are so many images that I love that you're behind. So I'm so excited. Like, this is why I love doing the Vancast, because I get to pull up a chair and go, wow, how'd you get this shot,
I'm happy to. I love that you said that this is one of your favorite images. It's definitely, it's the question that I get, in my career constantly, which is, what's your favorite picture? Or like, what's the most dangerous situation that you've ever been in? And I will say, like, as a favorite picture, it's a wonderful, technically executed picture, this image. It's a beautiful light, great composition, great moment. But I think then it has that extra layer for me, which is, I had been up on El Cap for 6 or 7 days at that point with Tommy and Kevin They're both super close friends. Out of the picture, Brett Lowell, filmmaker, is just on my right shoulder. And it's just the whole experience of being up there for the, 10 days in total. It's the experience box gets checked, drinking whiskey on a portaledge with 3 of my best buddies and making, beautiful pictures because I'm just there in the right place being a photojournalist. It kind of checks the multiple boxes, right? The experience box, which isn't always checked with great photos. Sometimes you have a technically great photo. It's great light, great composition, great moment. But it had great light, great composition, great moment. And personally, it was a really wonderful experience. And so this may be the picture that I point at as well as like one of my favorite pictures of my career.
Well, when I was following the whole story of them going up the Don Wall, and then I saw this grace the cover of Rock and Ice, and I didn't even have a subscription to Rock and Ice at the time, and I went out and I bought it for this image. Wow. So yeah, just beautiful stuff. But of course, that wasn't your first day taking photographs. So what's a little bit of your backstory for those who may not know? San Jose State getting into photojournalism, was it the camera side and then the words side, or what came first for you in this world?
I have to tell a little story. I was my mom and dad live in Gardnerville, Nevada. They retired just 45 minutes down the hill on the Nevada side, just on the eastern slope of the Sierra Nevada mountains. And I went down. I have this goal now of going down and cleaning up all of my stuff. Like my wife and I moved recently, and we had so much stuff in our basement that we bought a shipping container, a 40-foot shipping container, and we put it on my parents' property. And anything that didn't fit into our house just got thrown into the shipping container. But box by box, I'm slowly and methodically going through these boxes and cleaning them out and deciding what to recycle, shred, old taxes and business documents, and what to, throw away because it's just trash, and what to keep. And I kind of struck gold yesterday, and I found this box that I do not remember keeping this stuff, but it was a bunch of lanyards, like kind of badges, press credentials, and any event that I went to where I had to wear like a lanyard. And I found my press credential for the Antelope Valley Press in 1994 when I was in high school, working at this little newspaper in the Mojave Desert. And it was like taking a trip down memory lane. I found my badge for going to the Eddie Adams workshop in New York. And I found my badge. I found my student ID for San Jose State for like 3 years in a row or 2 years in a row. But the short background is I fell in love with rock climbing first. I did 35 pull-ups. I won a pull-up contest in junior high school. And one of my PE teachers invited me to go rock climbing. He saw this short, strong kid, and he invited me to go climbing. And my dad was a teacher, and he said, sure, if a teacher invited you, go for it. And I the first weekend just fell in love with every aspect of climbing. And the next weekend I wanted to borrow my dad's camera to shoot photos of climbing because I wanted to share it with my buddies back on the playground. And my photos were awful. And I learned it's not just about the camera, like you had to learn how to use it. And so I started really passionately pursuing how to become a better photographer, checking out VHS videotapes at the library and reading books. And that really led to, I ended up at the Antelope Valley Press doing a little work on the side. I had an incredible literature teacher of all things, American lit teacher, James Duprat, who sadly is no longer with us. And his wife happened to be the managing editor of the newspaper. And so he said to Lynn, I've got this kid that really loves photography. Would you let him work for the paper? And that kind of, that started to open my eyes, broaden my horizons. Then I went off to San Jose State in the photojournalism program, and then ended up at the Modesto Bee for 2 summers. Took a semester off from school and drove around, sleeping in my Honda Civic, photographing rock climbing. I bought 100 rolls of Fuji Velvia film, and I had a camp stove and, a bunch of canned food. And that was the real test. And I'd ship my film back to the Modesto Bee, and they had this special film processing machine called the Wing Lynch processor. And they would process 10 rolls of my film at a time. And then I would call into the Modesto Bee from a phone booth because it was pre-cell phone. And they would give me kind of the report. They'd give me feedback, both critical and constructive. And the feedback was often, like, hey, you need to check there's sand in your camera. It's scratching some film. But then they would also tell me, like, hey, you need to like you're out of focus, but the best feedback that they gave me, they used to play tricks also. They would say, like, do you want the good news or the bad news? And I'd say, I guess the bad news. And they would say, your film's blank. And I'd tear up because I'm like, that's 2 weeks of work and, $200 worth of film. And then they'd say, we're just kidding. We're just kidding. But the best feedback that they gave me is they said, you're shooting incredible peak action photos of climbers, figures in a landscape. And they said, what you need to work on at this point is shooting the lifestyle, the in-between moments, the photojournalistic moments when you're not climbing. What is everyone doing? And that was the best advice Al Golub, who is the director of photography at the Modesto Bee, gave me. And, that afternoon after I left the phone booth, I kind of went back to camp and everyone was hanging out in a campground in Moab. And I started shooting everyone hanging out there. I remember vividly, they were playing Twister. Someone had like a Twister mat. And it was kind of a drizzly day, and they had the Twister mat set up, and I started shooting photos of Twister with like the cliffs in the background. And fast forward 6 months, I go back to school, edit the pictures down to like the best climbing photos, the best lifestyle photos, and I do 2 unsolicited submissions, one to Climbing Magazine and one to one to Climbing and one to Patagonia, the clothing brand. And over the next 5 years, all of the photos I submitted to Patagonia got used, 20 images. And a couple of pictures that I sent to Climbing Magazine got used, and including one became the cover of an issue of Climbing Magazine. And that was the true jumping off point. Like, I went back to college thinking, okay, I'm going to be hanging out in college now. I need to figure out what I'm actually doing. Am I getting a job at a newspaper? Like, how's this going to work? And within 6 months of getting back to college, I made enough money to go and spend another 6 months out on the road shooting photos, buying film, buying gas. And that was it. That was the true jumping off point into, I never really thought this could be a career, but the kind of answer came pretty quickly that it could be.
Yeah. I love the lifestyle stuff. Like you said, they gave you that advice to shoot the action, shoot the behind the scenes stuff. And I think I really like that style. And some of the images that got me into climbing were seeing some of the lifestyle stuff in Valley Uprising, which I think came a lot from, I think, someone you look up to a lot, right? Tom Frost.
That's right.
Do you know Dean Fidelman?
Yeah, I sure do.
Yeah, he's been on here a couple of times, but
okay.
he's done some really amazing work. And so I love that behind the scenes stuff. And it's kind of what got me into climbing, but I think it never really progressed for me because I always got too scared to like overcome some of these really, technical things and having some head injuries in my past. But for you, was it, were you ever intimidated to bring a camera up where you're now focusing on something really technical with climbing and camera?
Yeah. I mean, climbing early on, that was the original hook, right? I mean, I was a gymnast and I was super fit. That's why I did 35 pull-ups. And climbing came pretty naturally straight away. I mean, I loved, there's no ceiling to the challenge. I mean, I was, decent at it, but it's like I really took to climbing. And I certainly think back to the early days of my climbing skills, and I think about my brother and I going climbing, and we did some super questionable things with the wrong equipment, and I'm amazed neither of us are dead or paralyzed from our early exploits as rock climbers in the early 90s. But I will say then my skill set evolved and I became a pretty solid and technically competent climber, meaning with the rope work, and I feel I'm knock on wood, like unfazed by I can rappel off a 20-foot boulder or a 3,000-foot cliff. It just has zero effect on me. And I learned pretty early that you have to be able to like shift gears in the creative space when you're photographing rock climbing. There's this moment where first and foremost, you need to like keep up with the athletes and be safe. That's category number one. It's like you're keeping up and you're being safe. And safe means I'm not going to kill myself or the athlete, right? I'm not going to kick a big block of rock off and hit them because I'm swinging out to grab a photo. I'm looking at where the rope is. I'm not going to cut it on an edge. I'm being safe and I'm keeping up. I'm like the competent athlete. But then once you're okay, I'm safe. I'm not putting anyone in danger. Then there's a quick switching of gears. It's like, okay, now I need to be creative. I need to stop thinking about where the rope is, and like, am I tied in correctly, and is my locking beaner locked, and do I have an Jumar to back me up, and is that stopper going to pull out of the wall that I'm like tensioned on? You have to block all of that out and start being creative. Like, it's now, okay, that's behind me. Now I'm looking through this rectangle and I'm thinking about light, moment, and composition, and I'm anticipating what's about to happen, and I'm in the head of that athlete, and I'm now communicating in a way that's not intimidating or irritating or antagonizing to the athlete. And I'm that fly on the wall, and I'm making great pictures. And then in an instant, like, they pass me, I've made the pictures, and then it's like back into the other gear of like, okay, now I need to get 40 feet up without kicking the rock and ripping the stopper out and hitting myself in the head, and I don't want to cut the rope, and so there's a lot of like back and forth. It's like forward and reverse equivalents, like really extreme differences in terms of like mental thought process. But I don't know, that came pretty early, and I've always been a believer that if I'm not prepared to do something, I'll just show up early and like do it when no one's watching, and practice and practice and practice, so that by the time it's go time to take pictures, I feel really comfortable. Like, I've rehearsed how I'm going to do it, and I've worked out the rope work, and I've worked out like how that stopper is going to stay in the crack. And, and then of course, like anything, it's muscle memory, right? The more you do things, it becomes second nature, and you kind of, it's no longer conscious, it's subconscious, the way that you move up there. And, that's where I like to be. And if I'm not hanging on a rope for a couple of months, you get a little rusty, and you have to get rid of the cobwebs. But it comes back pretty quickly.
That's amazing. That's a really interesting way to look at it. I've never thought of it like that. I think it can go for a lot of things, but you really do need to be proficient in operating your camera, and then also climbing, and then you're kind of marrying them together.
Yeah.
Actually, Chris Burkhardt, you know him, right?
Yeah,
he was on here too, and he put it, the way he put it was, the camera becomes an extension of yourself. You're not worried about the settings. When the moment happens, you're prepared to make the photo.
Yeah, I mean, I think Chris is right in the way that he says that when you're really shooting a lot, whatever environment that is. I mean, Chris has a unique skill set to also be in the water with like a water housing, and he's like, waves breaking over him. And, for me, it's certainly my sweet spot is like the vertical environment, hanging on a rope. And it's true, you're not even thinking about the aperture and shutter speed and ISO, and it's just, that's all second nature, totally subconscious. You're just so comfortable in the space that all you're thinking about is what's happening in front of the camera. Like, you're thinking about the moment, like you're seeing spectacular situations unfold in front of you, and you're depressing that shutter because you've get all the technical stuff works all the time. I mean, I always say that the reason we keep on buying the next version of camera is because I want that camera to do all the thinking for me, the technical stuff for me. I don't really care what aperture, shutter speed, or ISO, or how aperture I might care about occasionally, and shutter speed depending on what I'm doing, but I want the camera to solve all those problems for me. Like, if it could just be the camera shot what I was seeing, if there was a connection between my brain and the camera, and I didn't have to ever roll this dial or press the shutter, I could just, that would be amazing. But it's, we pay a lot of money for cutting edge cameras because those cameras are super sophisticated computers that make a lot of decisions for us. Focus is the best example, right? I mean, no one manually focuses anymore because the autofocus systems are incredible, and that's worth it. Like, I'll buy the next camera because the autofocus is even better, and I'll nail more pictures.
I was re-listening to your interview on the Enormocast like a week ago, and that, what you just said, kind of reminds me of, like, you have this idea in your head about, an image that you want to go and make happen. How often is it that way, where you are envisioning what you want to go get, or how often is it you're just in a moment and suddenly you're creating in real time, or is it kind of a combination?
Yeah, I feel like I live in both worlds, actually. I live in, look, my favorite place to be is that, I'm going to call it that photojournalistic verite style of shooting. I know verite applies to video, but where it's, I'm along for the ride. I'm a fly on the wall. I'm a documentary photographer. on an expedition. I love that. It's my favorite thing in the world is we're in some exotic place, and it starts the moment we meet in the airport, and we're loading all of our bags onto the scale, and people hanging in the lounge and on flights passed out, and then we get, from the plane to the bus to the train to the yaks to the we're walking to the cliff. And I love just having the ability to, I don't have preconceived ideas at that point. I'm just simply, as it unfolds, I have these micro preconceived ideas where I see we're all dragging our bags, and then I see, oh, there's a donkey to the left. Oh, that's going to be a cool photo. And I drop my bags and I run. But those are, split second decisions. So I live in that world. I love that. And that happens on the cliff. It happens, on ski expeditions. But then I live in this other world, which is, I have high-end commercial clients that hire me, where everything is premeditated. I mean, we spend tons of time thinking about what we're going to do, scouting locations. I spend days on the phone with storyboard artists where we're drawing what's going to happen to get everybody aligned on, like, this is what the scene is going to look like. And that's a totally different part of the brain. And I think that's easier for me to preconceive those kind of what a commercial project is going to look like, because I spend so much time in that photojournalistic documentary world where moments just unfold. I sort of understand, like, okay, this would be amazing if it could happen, but I can make it happen in the commercial world. Yeah. And so just yesterday I was on the phone with the storyboard artist for, 2 hours drawing 40 different storyboards. And it's, it's forces me into this world where I'm really trying to anticipate, what do I want to have happen? And then our production team will make that happen so that I can create those moments as conceived on the storyboards. So two different, I don't know if it's two different sides of the brain, not really two different sides of the brain. It's just two different disciplines. And I have to just always be conscious of which world am I operating in at that moment.
I mean, it sounds like you really have to know what you're doing to, like, make something happen. But then also, I'm sure there's moments when you plan something, you get it, and then also, I mean, in real time, new ideas are coming into your head. Are you always thinking about ideas, or how do you ever turn it off where you're just living your life, not thinking about different ways to capture something beautiful happening?
Yeah, no, I don't think you ever turn it off. I don't know if you ever want to turn it off.
Okay.
I don't ever want to turn it off, right? You gotta stay hungry and limber, and
I guess be okay with not having a camera with you at every waking second.
I'm definitely comfortable with, more so now, with every time I see something, I can't pull over and take a picture of it.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's moments where it's like, nope, that one's just for my head. That's like, that's just for my brain. And other times it's like, nope, that's worthy enough that I'm going to pull that phone out of my pocket or pull the Nikon out of my bag. And, here's a great example of it. The last 2.5 months in Lake Tahoe have been unbelievable, off the charts, wild amounts of snow. And it's been the best winter for me ever. It's been so fun. Like, I've skied more days this winter than ever before, more powder days.
And, I can hear it in your voice.
So fun.
You were sounding giddy on the phone.
Oh, God, it was so fun. And town looks, I've never seen town this way. We have a 15-foot berm across the street right now. We have a 15-foot berm in our yard. And I know there's an incredible set of photos of this town that someone, I hope, made over the last 2.5 months, but it wasn't me. Like, I took a couple of pictures with my iPhone to document what town looks like, but I make a conscious decision. I have tons of other responsibility, and I'm prioritizing. Like, you have X amount of time in the day, and if I can't do anything like half-ass, it's either I'm all in or I'm not going to do it. And if I wanted to document what South Lake Tahoe looked like during the last 2.5 months, I would have been all in, and I would have put 100 hours into it. I would have been flying drones, and I would have been getting up early. But there's too many other commitments, like too many other obligations, both photographically and for my filmmaking career and for my family, that I just consciously made the decision, this isn't going to be like the thing that I shoot. But I saw a million images that were incredible, like incredible moments over the last, 2.5 months. And it's not that I haven't been shooting photos. I just had to decide I can't pull over the car every time I see a cool snow photo, because I'm doing other work. I'm planning other projects. I need to pick up my daughter at this time. And so I think, I don't know, I don't know if this sounds like a cop-out or if it's just a reality. I'm taking pictures in my brain constantly. It's just more of a conscious effort of, when am I going to pick up the camera? When am I going to stop the car? That's probably the best example.
Yeah.
Put the right lens on the Nikon and jump out of the car and run across the road to shoot that photo.
Yeah.
And that one I'm more selective of.
Okay.
Yeah.
Myself being primarily like a videographer, when I do dabble in photography, I got my point and shoot right over there. I love shooting with that, because I don't stop and review a bunch of things. I can be more in the moment, take the photograph and then keep going. And then also I love flying my drone to do photography or mostly video. But back in November, I was filming my friend's wedding in Hawaii and I crashed it, busted it. And it's
during the wedding. Yeah.
I got everything, and then I trampled through some bushes to get it back. So I got all the footage, but the drone is a total loss.
Yeah.
And I haven't gotten another one yet. I'm almost like kind of waiting, because I've kind of been enjoying going, well, even if I wanted to fly right now, I couldn't.
Yeah.
Just enjoy it. And I'll get one in a few weeks, but it's kind of forced me to like slow down and just like appreciate these aerial views from the ground or from a vantage point, I guess.
Yeah. If I zoom out a little bit on that question you asked, I'm just more conscious of there's moments in my life that it's okay to just enjoy it. Like to not, because I want to shoot everything. Yeah. Just to be clear, like I wish I had time to shoot all the crazy conditions of the city and collapsing roofs and huge snow berms and plows. And I mean, it's historic, right? It's historic amount of snow. And I feel the same way sometimes when I'm just hanging out with friends and family. It's almost as though I like take a step back and I'm like, this is such a beautiful moment right now. Like, what's happening right now? I'm watching my daughter play with her friends, and, my best friends are around the table and everyone's having a good time. And it's, we're sitting around a campfire, whatever it is. And sometimes I take the picture, and sometimes it's like, no, sometimes I just want to be here. Like sometimes I actually just want to be present. And I know as soon as that camera goes up to my eye, I'm kind of not there anymore. And so there's just a consciousness around, I think I can be pretty deliberate about when I'm shooting, when I'm not, but I'm always seeing. That's the key is, right? You're always seeing, you're always thinking. It's just, when do you need it I was going to say on film, but when do you need a digital file, and when is just up here okay?
That's true. I don't think you can really turn it off, because even I run a lot and I'll be just running constantly, like thinking of this song would go great to this type of shot that I'm seeing the light come through the trees on this single track. You're always thinking, I feel like, as a creative, of what can be done with a camera.
Yeah, of course.
But going back to your roots then as a photojournalist, what is your motivation for wanting to convey these stories to others that you know or may not know? Public who, plenty of people read this that may never meet you, but what is the feeling that you get from creating, or the feeling you get from creating and then sharing?
The main goal is to move people, right? To motivate action is kind of the main objective. And, I say in the adventure sports world, it's really simple. Like, I get deep joy out of being in wild places with amazing athletes and pushing myself. And it's each time I depress that shutter, and hopefully, 1 in 10,000 times I depress that shutter, that an image ends up in print or online and people see it. I hope it just subtly inspires people to get outside, to have those experiences that have been so life-changing for me, right? That put our place on the planet in perspective, appreciate kind of the national parks, the wild places around us. And I guess that's it for me in the adventure world. It's if I can, while having a great time doing it, motivate people through my images to go outside, I'm winning. Like, I'm doing it. That's incredible. That's what I want to do. I mean, I really want I want my pictures to motivate folks to do things. I hope, and it's hard. I always say that as a professional photographer, I haven't done the math, but I'm guessing I've shot, 10 million pictures in my life. I'm just totally making this up. And 10,000 of them are good. and 100 of them are great. 20 of them are great. Like, it's really hard to make great pictures. So let's just say that number is correct. Shot 10 million, 100 great pictures or 20 great pictures. That ratio is low.
Mm-hmm.
And it's you need to do it a lot. And it's only the great pictures that really move people. The good ones, the good ones do this on the, like the needle goes this way, and the great ones, it pins the needle and moves people. But it's hard. Like I think any of my colleagues, any of my mentors, I think would say the same thing, that like part of being a professional is every day you need to be able to shoot good. That's your job, right? Like you need to go out and create good stuff every day. And every now and again, you get to do something that's great. You make a great picture. You shoot a great video that really moves the needle, that really moves people. And I mean, that's what I'm trying to do. And the more often you do great, the more you actually inspire people to do something, take action, go outside. And, I've never met somebody that really has gone outside, had some wild experience and says, oh, I don't want that anymore. Nature just provides this foundation in life that's pretty special. Like we all need it. Like we need to have those adventures. We need to kind of feel the edge a little bit.
Yeah. It's so life-giving. It's such a pure motivation too for creating. I love that how it makes you feel to be out in nature. That I think it could benefit so many people for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's as a parent, I have a 9-year-old girl, and part of the reason I live here because I love being outside, but I also want my daughter to grow up with access to adventure and the outdoors and understand kind of the value of preserving wild places. And it's, that's like the greatest gift. You take this little human being outside, and even when they're complaining, I don't want to go and I'm tired. And then they get out there and they have this huge smile, like ear to ear on their face. And you realize like, okay, they're tasting that same, natural medicine that I tasted 35 years ago. Yeah. This is what I want. This is like my job as a parent, is to provide that. And it's my job as a photographer to provide that.
Yeah. I know I mentioned that I probably wouldn't live in Cupertino because of, financially it's so difficult to buy a house there. But I mean, I grew up in the redwoods of Santa Cruz.
Right.
And it's like, that's what I want. If I have kids one day, I want to give them that same opportunity that I had to live in a place like that, rather than where I'm living right now. I'm like, I want what my parents gave me. Yeah. So I think that's wonderful that you're in a place that you can do that. What a cool thing.
Yeah. Today was pretty special. It was like a stormy day.
Yeah.
At Kirk, I took her to her little ski program, the Jets program at Kirkwood, and all of her little buddies are in it. And it was rough. It was like dumping snow and cold and windy. Yeah. I was soaking wet. And, I went and I hesitated. Should I go and check on her at lunch? Because that's also like, if she sees me and she's not having fun, then she's like, I want to go home. But I just wanted to see her, and I checked in, and she was having a blast. And I thought, this is how you build toughness, and it's how you build like a love for Mother Nature, and, life lessons get learned. Like now she doesn't argue with me when I tell her to put on one extra layer. Because she gets it. Yeah. It's cold. And like, you're going to be warmer if you put on that extra layer.
I remember those days for sure. That was me. Through your work, you've just had incredible opportunities to travel. This is just an incredible book. Do you have a favorite like story from this book, whether it's not necessarily an image that you love from this book, but something that you really look at this book and go, I'm so glad I included that story, that I really had a learning moment on, or just a wonderful experience with friends in the wild?
I don't know if there's a single, and to be honest, the book came out a couple of years ago, so I can't honestly say I remember all of the stories, but I will say it's the book as a whole. I'm so glad that I did the book, because it's, I don't know if I said this in the foreword, but I gave enough talks during the book tour that, I found myself opening frequently with, look, part of the motivation for writing this book was that if I got hit by a bus tomorrow, my daughter would know who I was. Like, I mean, and I hope, it sounds like you've read part of the book or the whole book. And I'm curious, like, I'd love to hear your opinion. I hope someone that reads this book gets a feel for, like, I think I kind of know who this guy is. Yeah. Like, I kind of know what he stands for. I know it. I understand his motivation. I kind of his humility. I understand that he's, makes mistakes and will own them. And that was like the best experience in writing this book. You know, I like to also say that this wasn't a portfolio of my best work. Like there's a bunch of good pictures in here and a few great pictures in here. But sometimes the great pictures don't have a good story. Like there's just nothing behind it. It's like, it's a great picture, but not a great story. And I wanted as many photos as possible in this book to have a great story or good story with a teachable moment, right? That there's some takeaway that like, okay. So there's a lot of pictures in this book that I kind of cringe where I'm like, it's not like a great photo. I mean, it's a good photo, but there's a good story attached to it. And, you know, and that's, it's like that teaching part, that teacher part of me that like, you know, I one day will still be a teacher. I mean, I think one day when nobody wants to hire me to shoot photos, I'll go to the community college or a university or a high school and teach. But that was, you know, this is me channeling that passion for teaching.
Well, I mean, I can definitely speak, if you want to hear my thoughts, I can definitely speak to, it feels very personal. I feel like having read it a few times now, I mean, when I open the door to the van, I feel like I almost know you a little bit, you know? Meeting you for the first time, obviously, is one thing, but I mean, there's amazing stories from these wild places, but then you also talk about how you met your wife. Like, that's such a beautiful thing that you have this now, you know, this work of art that you can, you know, pass on to your daughter, for example. But then I think it also inspires people to really take a look at their own life and say, yeah, I'm going day to day and going to work, but like what's going on in my life that I can really like hold on to and appreciate rather than just going through the motions. I think you're a phenomenal storyteller, and I think it's caused me to say, yeah, I may get bored from day to day, but if I zoom out, I'm like, this is an amazing thing what we're all doing together, and everybody has such a unique story. I think reading your stories, they're funny, they're insightful, and it's just, I think it cause for reflection.
Well, thanks for that. Yeah, thanks for that. And I go back to that means a lot to hear that, because it is true that you rarely hear that feedback. And I think, you know, your comment around sometimes you feel like you're just going to work and telling a story, but it's that muscle memory. It's like what you're doing every day is you're practicing the craft. And so then when it's time for you to tell a story that you're more passionate, not that work isn't something you're passionate about, but it's like, that's the thing to always remember, that you're getting paid to train, right? Like if you were an athlete, if you were still running, you know, as a collegiate athlete, you're getting paid to lap the track right now. And like and it's up to you whether you're going to like push it sometimes or you're going to like, you know, call it in. But it's the more times you lap that track, the faster you get. And I think photography and storytelling is very much, and filmmaking is very much that way. You just, you know, it's, I know I started by talking about Malcolm Gladwell. He's the guy that kind of coined the 10,000 hour rule, but he borrowed it from a researcher, and I can't remember the researcher's name. And Gladwell took it a little out of context. It's not 10,000 hours. It's actually way more than 10,000 hours is how you get good. You know, that was like a very specific example that this researcher made in his dissertation. But Gladwell, you know, coined that as the 10,000 hour rule. And it's like, I think that's what you're doing every day at work, right? You're just contributing to the 10,000 hours or the 20,000 hours, so that then when you want to go out and tell, you know, do your podcast or tell another story, you're just in a sweet spot to do it. You know, you've done it. Like you know, there's no surprises. Like you've just been there, done that. Muscle memory, right? It goes back to that muscle memory hanging off a rope. You know, one theme that's really been kind of reoccurring in my head, and it's a theme that's come up in life pretty frequently in the last 6 months, is just how in our industry, in the storytelling world, and I think you could apply this to the sports world as well, so much of what we do is we're furthering what the generation did before us. We're standing on the shoulders of those who came before us. And I don't know why, I've just been really nostalgic recently and thinking about those people. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing if it weren't for some really important people in my life that, you know, and I mentioned James Duprat when I was my literature teacher who loved photography, that took me under his wing, and the PE teacher, Bob Porter, and George Egbert, a math teacher, George Egbert, that took me rock climbing. And I get to college and there's Jim McNay, and like he takes me under his wing and like puts this freshman into his, junior, senior program. I end up at the Modesto Biennale Golub, and then I start shooting climbing, and Tom Frost and Galen Rowell take me under their wings, and Dick Duane. And I guess it's just that point that there's part of what our industry, the photography industry, but certainly my career is built on, is other people kind of acknowledging. I don't think it was a gift. I don't think they didn't look at me and be like, that guy's talented. They just thought, that guy's working, he's trying hard. That's it. He's passionate and he's trying hard. And then bringing you into the fold and saying, hey kid, I'll share with you what I can. I'll help provide opportunity. That's the gift. And I think, and maybe maybe I've been like reflecting on this idea because I'm getting a little older, and I realize, wait, that's like my responsibility now. I'm transitioning into that phase in my life where I want to, and I hope I've always been there, but I'm more and more, I want to make sure when I meet that young or old new photographer that's kind of emerging, and I see that passion, that I'm willing to and have the bandwidth to provide time to help kind of let them stand on my shoulders. Two of my favorite chapters in this book, I think, to your original question, one is about Tom Frost and how, Tom Frost helped me, and another is about Rich Clarkson, an incredible mentor and photographer and director of photography at National Geographic and Sports Illustrated, who really kind of also took me under his wing and showed me a side of this industry that I just didn't understand how big this world could be and what the possibilities were. And I think that's one of the, as I look at this book project, it's like that's part of the spirit of the whole book, was how do I help kind of be a stepping stone for somebody else? Like, there's that moment where you stand on other shoulders, and then it's time for other people to stand on your shoulders. And I kind of like that when I feel like a foot digging into my shoulder because I'm catapulting somebody forward.
When I see your work, and I see, whether it's the cover of a magazine or the work of your book or the things you put online, I know it's not your first day with a camera. And I think, do you ever get those questions? Like, how do I get my work on, in this magazine or on this medium? Or, what kind of questions are you getting? And then are you telling people, about, this 10,000 plus hours, or, what's kind of your philosophy on making sure people have the right frame of mind for success, and then how to, help them reach, an obtainable, measurable goal?
I mean, I get those questions every day, and I'm not perfect with my responses. And if anyone's listening that sent me an email that I never responded to, I apologize. I get a lot of email, and not just with questions for, advice emails, but life's busy, and it's a real coincidence. I mean, when I travel, it's really hard to keep up with email. You come home to 1,200 emails in your inbox, and you might not catch up, and that's like the reality. But when I do see an email where someone's asking for help or advice, if I can possibly make it happen, I will. Like, that is just who I am. And I think I just had enough people in my life that gave more than they needed to kind of support not just me, but many other young bucks, and, not just young kids, men and women that wanted to do something cool with their lives, and where a camera was a part of that. And so, yeah, the answer is, if I am always keen to get on the phone. I prefer to talk to someone than to kind of write an email. Honestly, now my answer is you should first start by reading this book.
Yeah.
There's an audiobook version of it, but the reader is pretty painful. So I usually say there's some good insights in this book. There's an audiobook version, but if you can handle the narrator, and no dig on him. It's a pretty tough listen, this audiobook. And then if it requires a phone call, and one thing that I'll say is it means a lot more. I'm always willing to get on the phone with someone, but if it doesn't feel like they did their homework, I get pretty turned off pretty quickly. It's sort of, there's a lot of basic information in this book or online, and that's part of the pay to play. Like, okay, part of the pay part is like, show some commitment, like get in there, dig in, read, do some research online, listen to a podcast. And then it's like, if you've done that and you still haven't heard the answer, I'm 100% available. I will make time. I'll get up at 5 a.m. to talk to someone before my wife's awake and my kid's awake, and to kind of give back.
That's incredible.
But I will say it's, and I think teachers say this all the time, when you get that kid that they've got a bazillion questions, but they never do their homework, it's kind of hard. It's like, that's what the homework's for.
Well, that's something I should definitely mention too about this book, is that it's not all just glory. And I had this amazing trip and everything worked perfect, and then we got this awesome photograph. No, there's real stuff in there where it's like, this didn't work out, or I got this feedback that I didn't want to hear. The story about the skiing with the glove, and they said that's a gardening glove, or it's things that people are actually going to come across in life, where not everything is just good feedback. Actually, right now in my job, that's something that I'm actually really craving, is that I work with a bunch of doctors who aren't creative, and they go, "Yeah, that's great. I like that." And I'm like, "Well, no, give me something to like work with. I want to hear why it could be better." Or rather, that's not what we're looking for. I'm like, "Okay, well, let's collaborate." So, that's a great thing about this book, is that it's real life. It's not just win. It's like, no, there's some tough stuff.
I mean, one of the things I've learned working with lots of creative people, from outdoor companies, their marketing directors and designers, to tech companies and their kind of product leads and marketing teams, is you definitely grow if you open your mind, if you're hearing constructive and critical feedback, but really like hearing it and growing from that feedback is a huge opportunity. I mean, that's one of the things I've really learned, is that oftentimes smart people, when I listen to their feedback and I really process what they're saying, it makes the projects better. It's sort of when you can check your ego at the door, and it's like, okay, this is a collaborative process. I'm the guy that knows how to operate the camera. I know how to tell stories, but now let me really listen to what my client is saying. Or athletes are a great example. They're living it every day, right? They don't have to go back to the office and write captions and deal with emails to clients and billing, and they're doing it every day.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes their feedback is incredible. They say, "Hey, I think this is going to be great around the corner," and then you get around the corner and you realize, "Holy shit, this is incredible what we saw around the corner."
Yeah.
And it's being open-minded, I think, is a real being open-minded and really listening, hearing what folks are saying, is a huge attribute in this industry. And I say that with the doctors. They may not give you the critical, creative feedback, but they're going to have insights that, if you can hear it the right way, they're going to say things that are, maybe it's the critical, ego-loaded feedback about what they liked or disliked. But when you can check your ego, maybe there's some nugget in there with these guys, because they're smart. These are, these are cutting-edge researchers and physicians and healthcare professionals. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's outside of my world. What
No, it's absolutely right, and it does actually cause me to reflect a little bit more, because if you just get the feedback, like, I don't like this photograph.
Yeah.
Well, then it's like I have to kind of put myself in their shoes and look at their audience. Why is this rehabilitation person saying this isn't going to work for what they need? It's like it causes me to think a little bit more. But, one of the questions that my former boss, the marketing director, said was, how do you take feedback? And I said at the time, and I think I just said it because it was, a job interview, but I really have begun to reflect on it over the past few years, is that the question was, how do you take feedback, that you may not like? And I just said it at the time, but I think as time has gone on, I've really kind of leaned into it, was that I like it. And I said I like it because I said it's going to make me a better creative. And it's not always easy, but if you can like check your ego, it's going to make your work better. I always say it's the writer's table, can most of the time have a better idea than just the one person trying to write something. So
yeah. I get a lot of feedback, sometimes solicited and sometimes unsolicited. And it's not, I'm not like making it sound easy. It's hard to like take that feedback, process it, and then act on that and acknowledge the feedback and act on it. But it's, often 9 times out of 10, that feedback makes you better if you can really kind of internalize it and kind of deconstruct that feedback and what they're saying and why, And, each person responds to feedback differently, and the duration of time that it takes to actually kind of display the fact that you heard it takes time. It takes time. Everyone's a little different. Some people can react immediately to like, I heard it. Now I'm going to kind of enact changes in order to accommodate the feedback that you gave me. And for other people, it's, takes more time, and other people, they just can't hear it. Like they just can't hear the feedback. I try. That's for sure. Yeah.
Well, conversely, let's say that you do stand by a creative decision, and this question may be too broad because there's so many variables, but how do you, or have there been times where you've had to push back because you stand by a decision, or does it really all depend on who the client is, what the situation is when you say, well, I have this experience?
Yeah.
And how do you kind of give that back sometimes?
Yeah. I mean, fundamentally, I know what I like, and I think you have to, as a creative, have a position on what's good. Right? What's good. And again, I'm just talking about good, not great. Like we all know what great is, but it's really hard to get there. I know what good is. And sometimes a client gives me feedback and I don't agree with it, but I do it. And I think, sometimes I'm surprised and I'm like, that's good. More often than not, it's like, that's not as good as what I was going to do for you. But like, I gave it to you. Now I'm going to go back to what I think is good. And I think it's important to have that position. I think it's important to know you can never forget what your North Star is. Like, what is true North for you? And it's like, that might be different for a client. Like it might be, a couple of degrees this way or a couple of degrees this way. But I think you hear it, you try it. But I never forget, like, there's plenty of shoots that I finish and I've, clients been in my ear the whole time. And I think it would have been so much better if I just did it like my own way. But hey, they're happy. This was a job. I was getting paid to do this. I'm working for that person. This isn't about me. This is about, I'm bringing to the table my expertise. They give me feedback. I calibrate based on their feedback. And that's why it's important to have projects that are just for you. Or clients that allow you to just be you. You've got to find that mix. It's sort of like, two taps. It's like the oxygen settling tank on a welder. Like it needs just the right amount of mix to have the like hot flame. And it's, there's jobs where the flame's not that hot because it's like, I'm just dealing with feedback. And one thing that I've learned to do though is like totally disconnect. I'm not going to get pissed when I disagree with a client. I mean, it's kind of like, like I wouldn't do it this way, but I'll explain why I would do it a different way. And if they still feel adamant, we're going to do it. Like, no problem.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I mean, I'm on this is your day. Like this is your week or your month. I'm doing it for you and I'll do it. And it's like, I'm still going to have a great time and I'm going to get to know this person. I'm going to have fun that evening and I'm still going to make some great pictures along the way. But it's, I'm not going to get bent out of shape about it. There's no why. I mean, like, what's the point? Like because it's only this week that I'm working for this person and the next week it's somebody else and I move on and there will still be great pictures and hope. It's more important to me that their experience is great. And because if their experience is great, I actually have a better time too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Chris said that same thing. He's like, sometimes there's projects I maybe don't want my name on because they wanted it a certain way. But, ideally a good, client, knows who you are when they're hiring you and they have some level of trust at least.
Yeah.
So,
and that same client, I'm channeling Chris here for a second. I don't know if he and I have ever had this exact discussion, but there's definitely, you work for clients where you're like, yeah, I'm not super proud of that work, but oftentimes that same client, you get some other gift. Like you learn something. They have some other insights that turns out the gift wasn't you made really amazing pictures, but the gift is, while sitting at dinner, they give you this insight into this thing that you didn't know or this world that you don't understand. And I'm cool with that. That's just as good. I'm just as happy getting that.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it too. It doesn't have to be a wash. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not black and white.
Yeah.
It's not you make great pictures, then it was a good job. Or you didn't make great pictures, it wasn't a good job. It's sometimes you make decent pictures but you have a wonderful experience.
Yeah.
Sometimes you make great pictures and you have a terrible experience. It's kind of, it goes, it's a complex formula, complex, continuum that we work in.
Absolutely. And I'd say to people, it even goes back to my own, not talk about myself again, but my own career trajectory where, I'm 29 now. So, I mean, I've worked in like 10 different jobs. I always, go one to the next.
That's pretty good. And yeah, that's pretty
it's
good.
too much. I think I've been at this current job for about 2.5 years. That's my longest so far.
Okay.
But even if I, don't particularly love a job, I can look back now and go, I learned this one thing. I learned how to do headshot photography at this one, spot. And then the next job, I learned this thing. And I related it to, have you seen that film Slumdog Millionaire?
Yes. Yeah.
Where the guy knows all the answers because of...
Or I listened to the audiobook. I don't know if I saw the film. Okay.
So he knows all the answers to this game show. Well, they're torturing him because they think he's cheating when really he just has coincidentally had all these life experiences that helped him to get the right answers.
Right.
So I know along the way, like I'm picking up things. I might hate this job, but I know like there's going to be something that I can use later if you just like pay attention, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I know you have some travel coming up, right? But I have a question that kind of leads into that. I want to ask, if you could travel to and create something, where would it be and what would you create or take photographs of? And then what do you have coming up that you're looking forward to?
Yeah. Let's see. Well, it's easier to talk about what I have coming up. I'm working on an incredible film, and this is a passion project that hopefully one day will find the funding and everyone can get paid and the world gets to see it. But I'm working on a film about an amazing woman named Alexandra Hochin, who's an indigenous mountain bike phenom, lives in Minnesota and is just the most charismatic underdog who's taking the world by storm and will move so many people and change lives. So working on that's kind of the thrust of my passion projects for the next, 2 years probably. A year of shooting and probably a year of post and a lot of trying to go out and sell it. So that's exciting, kind of a half dozen shoots coming up in the next 9 months with Alexandra. And let's see, so that's like the passion project. One other passion project, just, it's a mix of work and play. 7 of my buddies here in Lake Tahoe, we're going to Greenland in 3 weeks and we're skiing off of a sailboat. We're doing a bit of an expedition looking for great skiing in Greenland. And so that's just around the corner. Like I need to start packing my bags soon and getting ready for that one.
Skiing off a sailboat?
Yeah. So we'll kind of, sail into the fjords and look for a slope, and then we'll all kind of, we'll nose the boat in, or we'll bring a Zodiac raft to the shore.
Wow. And
then we all go skiing, look for amazing backcountry terrain. And, it's a mix of pleasure and work. So that should be a good one. And mixed into all of that is some, really high-end commercial work, most of which I'm not allowed to talk about.
Sure.
But, that's kind of what's on my docket right now. Gosh, if I could do anything, I have to say this, the two projects that I care about right now, the trip to Greenland and the project with Alexandra, that's kind of what I want to be doing. Like those are like spot on, bullseye, like exactly what I want to be doing. Like telling stories that will move people, sharing profiles of inspiring people. Alexandra is like exactly that. I'm inspired when I spend time with her. And this trip to Greenland, like, this is what keeps me alive, are these, real wild, rad, remote adventures. I love this shit. I love this stuff.
That's so cool. Like if you can say like what you're dreaming to do is what you're already about to do, like what a great life, what a cool opportunity. And I know it hasn't been with a lot of like, trials and hard work, as people should definitely read in your book. But again, it's just been phenomenal to have you on in a beautiful place, Tahoe. Watch, we're going to open this door and probably be snowed in here. But yeah, Corey, I thank you so much for coming on the Vancast to share all of your insights and kindness.
Yeah, man, my pleasure. Yeah, real treat. Thanks for driving up.
Absolutely. We'll do it again sometime, and we'll see you out on the road.
Yeah, sounds good.